And if you look over to your chat, you are going to notice I am putting in the Tennessean warning. This is required by law, and I need to make sure you are aware that we are recording the session. Webex automatically records your IP address and email address. If you do not want to provide that information, you are more than welcome to call into the meeting instead. The call-in number is available on our website. Okay, I'm going to go ahead now and share the presentation for today. Okay, we have a lot of material to get through in the next 2 hours. It may not take the whole time, but it's going to take a lot of the time. So we are asking that everybody for questions uses the chat feature. Our team will be monitoring that chat feature, and Kathleen or Dan will jump in and say, hey, we have a question, can you answer this? So please use the chat feature so we can get any of those questions answered for you. And then at the end of the presentation, we will go ahead and open up so you can unmute yourself and ask any additional questions that you may have. I do have a question about getting a copy of the presentation. The presentation is already available online. So if you went to the Office of Higher Education website for the Webex link, there's already the PowerPoint right on there for you. It's ready to go in a PDF format, and you're welcome to grab that. Okay, well, today we're here for the dual training grant, and we are going to go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with some welcoming and introductions. Thanks for being here with us today. My name's Jacqueline Mall-Sletton. I usually like to be present on the video, but just to be careful of making sure we protect the bandwidth and the Wi-Fi, I am not going to be on video today. I'm a financial aid administrator with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education, and I've been with the agency now for 4.5 years. And for the entire 4.5 years, I have overseen the Minnesota Dual Training Grant. If Kathleen could go ahead and introduce herself, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jacqueline. This is Kathleen Gordon, and I am a Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline Consultant, and I focus in on the industries of healthcare and information technology.
Thanks, Kathleen. Dan, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much, Jacqueline. So I'm Dan Solomon with Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. Like Kathleen, I'm a program consultant as well. I focus on advanced manufacturing and agriculture. Thanks for hosting this today.
Thanks, Dan. And Megan, would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Megan Fitzgibbon with the Office of Higher Education. I'm a state financial aid manager and work with Jacqueline on the dual training grant. I'm excited to get through today. Thanks.
Thanks, Megan. And I don't believe we have Annie or Catherine with us today. Dan, could you do the short introductions for Annie and Catherine?
Yeah, sure. So Annie is our program manager, our director, and so she's our boss. And Catherine works on, she splits her time. She spends half the time helping us with pipeline dual training and the other half with our high school initiative at Department of Labor and Industry called U-Skills Training.
Thank you. And U-Skills Training is a great segue into the dual training grant. So if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to Catherine directly, or Dan and Kathleen, who are on the workshop today. They can also answer any questions you might have. Our agenda for today is we're going to start off with just kind of touching base on a goal Minnesota has called the Minnesota Education Attainment Goal. And then we are going to do a high-level overview of the dual training grant. It is high level, so if you are looking for a lot more detail in it, please do reach out to either myself, Dan, or Kathleen, and we can help walk you through the details. But we'll have an overview. Then we are going to navigate the websites. So we're going to show you all the links that are going to be important for you to navigate the application process. And then we have 3 parts to the application that we are going to go through today. So this presentation is really to make you feel comfortable with the application documents that are already available online. So we have the application, there's supporting application documents, and then there's some application documents that are only applicable to certain applicants. And then at the end, we are going to briefly talk about a few good things to know if you move from being an applicant to a grantee, which we are definitely hoping to have a lot of new grantees coming in with us. And so we want to make sure you are aware of those upcoming timelines and items. And then we'll close with additional questions and our closing. Again, please use the chat feature throughout this presentation for any questions you might have. We will answer them as we go, but then I will allow you to unmute yourself at the very end, and then you can verbally ask any questions you may also have. To begin, a lot of people do not know that Minnesota has an education attainment goal. And so I like to take the time to make sure you are aware of this. And I am going to show you the web pages that are on our state agency website that could really help you navigate what this means to you as an employer and how it relates to the dual training grant. So the education attainment goal, what it is a goal to actually work to increase the percent of Minnesotans aged 25 to 44 to have attained a post-secondary certificate or degree to 70% by 2025. We only have about 4 to 5 years to meet that goal, and we're definitely working toward it. Recently, our agency put out a report called Educating for the Future 2020 update. That report is full of wonderful information about how we are able to reach this attainment goal. And then we also have county profiles to dig down into each specific county and how well they are progressing towards that attainment goal. What I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to go to the website. And I believe I need to stop sharing and then go back in. So hold on one moment with me, please. Okay, here we are. If for any reason you can't see the pages that I am referencing, go ahead and type in the chat and let us know about that and kind of make me aware. But right now you should be able to see the education attainment goal for 2025 webpage. And this is with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. You'll notice that in the very top right corner. We have a Tableau system that I'll actually show you where we are on meeting those goals that we have set forward for ourselves. And then we have county higher education profiles. And these profiles are also operated through Tableau, where you can click on your prospective county. I'm in Wright County, so I like to go ahead and select Wright County. And these are just 2 pages to kind of let you know what the county looks like as far as those graduating high school, going into the workforce, have obtained degrees, and where everything sits for that county. Why this education attainment goal is so important is because you as employers have a very strong influence on helping reach this goal. And these are a couple, you'll see the presentation, we're back to that now. You will see a couple key findings. I'm not going to go through these specifically. I know it's a lot of text on a PowerPoint screen, and you have access to this presentation online. But these are some key findings to pull from that report. And this is the one thing I really want to draw your attention to, is that in order to reach that 70% education attainment goal, we actually need to have an additional 100,700 new post-secondary credentials by 2025. And here's the really important piece of that. Of those credentials, 86% must be earned by students of color or American Indian students. This goal is to bring up all Minnesotans in this goal, not just to bring up a certain group. So we need to make sure that we have at least 86% coming from students of color or American Indian students. And as I mentioned earlier, the dual training grant is one of those ways to actually reach the Minnesota's education attainment goal. And employers are really essential to this goal. You are the ones committing to education for your employees. You're the ones helping support your employees through dual training programs to help those individuals be successful. And we have learned that through the dual training grant, a majority of dual trainees are income net workers. And there's a fair amount that have only earned a high school diploma or a GED. And therefore, these would be those individuals who are able to be added to the education attainment goal if they complete those new credentials. We recently, the Office of Higher Education reached out to some of our prior dual trainees. We're able to interview them and get some information and feedback from them about where they are today. And on the screen, you'll actually see a photo of Blessing and her family, her husband and her son. And Blessing completed the dual training program and became a licensed practical nurse at Coyona Regional Medical Center in Crosby, Minnesota. And what Blessing had to say was, the grant took away that financial burden for me. Also, right when I was done with school, I was offered a job as an LPN by my employer, which made my career change an easy transition. I'd recommend the Minnesota Dual Training Grant to anyone. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for this grant. So you can see how all the pieces connect. The Minnesota legislature has a goal. The Dual Training Grant is a program provided by the state of Minnesota. And then here we have all the way down to the individual level of saying this program works well and I'm able to be in the career that I am today because of it. This is a graph from our recent report. So annually, the Dual Training Grant creates and publishes a report. So in the 2021 report, this graph was there to actually show the ages of our dual trainees. And what you're going to notice is for the Dual Training Grant, a majority of dual trainees are what we like to call adult learners. So they're over the age of that 25 threshold. And research has shown that in Minnesota, of all students that are enrolled in post-secondary education, only about 19.5% is within that 25 to 34-year-old age range. However, with the dual training grant, of all the dual trainees, 37% were within that same category. And what that goes to tell you is the dual training grant is a great model for catering towards those adult learners, those individuals who have jobs, who have families, they have other commitments. And so that additional support of a dual training grant through their employer can really help them be successful. We are going to move forward now into the dual training grant overview. If you've been a grantee in the past, some of this may be a refresher for you. And if you're brand new, welcome. Again, we would love to talk more in detail about the dual training grant if you do have any questions above and beyond. So for the dual training grant, the dual training grant was established, the programming was established in 2015. The Minnesota legislature began with establishing the dual training pipeline over with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. So that is where Dan and Kathleen, our house, they work for the Department of Labor and Industry. And their the way to think about their main job is they work with the employers directly. They listen to employers, see what their needs are to be successful in their production and services. And then they go ahead and consult with those employers about different occupations and go ahead and set up the skills needed to be successful in those occupations. So they really design all of the programming around what it means to have a dual training model, to have related instruction paired with on-the-job training for these specific occupations. And then about a year later, after the programming was established, the Minnesota legislature went ahead and they established the Minnesota Dual Training Grants with the Minnesota Office of Higher Education. So that is where my position is housed, and my manager, Megan, who introduced herself earlier. And the grant actually goes ahead then and supports that related instruction component of the dual training model. Both of our agencies need to work very collaboratively together. We might be separate agencies, but we act as one team. Who is eligible to apply for a Minnesota dual training grant? To start off, the applicant must be either an employer or an organization of employers. Just like the programming piece at the Department of Labor and Industry is very focused on the employer perspective, so is the dual training grant. So the applicants need to be employers. And then for organizations of employers, really good examples would be a Chamber of Commerce, an industry membership type of organization, a workforce development community-based organization. Those are some examples. If you are considering applying as an organization of employers, please do check in with myself. We want to make sure everything is in order and that you are well prepared. There are a couple additional items to consider when you are an organization of employers. Then to be an applicant, you must have a dual training program that aligns with the actual industries and occupations. We'll go out to the website a little bit later and show you the long list of occupations. Our industries include advanced manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and information technology. One thing to note about information technology is you don't have to be an information technology type of employer, because information technology is seen as being applicable to any type of industry or type of employer. So that is one area that maybe you traditionally provide healthcare services, but you apply for a grant in information technology would be an example. Then applicants also need to employ or will employ, you can use this as a recruitment tool, dual trainees. And the dual trainees, those are your employees, they need to meet a few different items as well. So they need to physically work at a permanent work location within the state of Minnesota. That is within the physical boundaries of Minnesota. They need to actually get their feet at the permanent work location that's located in Minnesota. It is okay if the employer's corporate office is based out of state. It's also okay if the dual trainee, their home location or residence is out of state as well. So they do not, your employees do not have to be Minnesota residents in order to participate. We have several, they travel in from Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, but they work physically at Minnesota locations. The dual trainees cannot have already obtained these skills. So the dual training grant is not for maybe recertification or refreshers and relearning things. It's really those primary, they haven't learned these skills before, and we're giving them these new skills to be successful. And then the dual trainees also need to earn at the end of the program. They actually have to earn something. They need to earn that industry recognized degree, certificate, or credential. And I know that the word certificate can often become confusing for applicants. So if you have questions about the word certificate, please do reach out. The best way to think about it is with certificate, it's more on that certification level. So it can't be a certificate of completion, attending a seminar and completing, X amount of hours and being given a certificate that you were there. That won't be sufficient, unfortunately. So if you have questions around certificate, please reach out. And then lastly, what our applicants need to do is they need to make sure that they enter into an agreement with a qualified related instruction training provider. We often think of this as colleges, but it definitely doesn't have to be colleges. The dual training grant caters to a lot of different training providers. But we need to make sure that the applicant actually enters into an agreement so both parties know that they're going to be providing this type of training for the employees. And that segues us right into what type of a training provider is eligible to support an applicant grantee for the dual training grant. And to begin, the training provider needs to be operating legally within the state of Minnesota. This could mean that they're operated by the state of Minnesota itself or the Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota. We think of this as any of maybe your 2-year college or 4-year universities through the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities system, or the University of Minnesota, different campuses that are throughout our state. So those ones automatically are operating legally in Minnesota. Then we have a group that if they are registered as post-secondary institutions through our agency, the ones that are registered are mainly your private institutions. It could be Bethel University, the University of St. Thomas. Those would be the registered. And then there's also another category for licensed. Our licensed post-secondary institutions, we've got some really great like IT schools, welding schools, nursing schools that are licensed. So they're not registered, but licensed. And then also we do have a step for being exempt from licensure. Most of the training providers that are on that list of being exempt, most of them, they operate outside of the state of Minnesota and they don't have a physical presence here. Also, a majority of them work directly with employers. So an individual, just a general individual, couldn't walk in their doors and go to school there. You'd actually have to be an employee. And then also they do all their billing directly with their employer. An individual employee would never receive a bill for tuition. Those are some really good examples. There's a long list of why a training provider might be exempt, and I am more than happy to go through those steps with any of those training providers who think they might fall into this category. Our training providers, they also need to provide instructor-led related instruction. This means at some level, an instructor needs to be involved. The related instruction cannot be, go ahead, go online, pay $3,000 for this course. You're going to have access to these modules. You're going to do it all by yourself. Nobody ever checks in with you. You're going to take a quick quiz at the end, and then we're going to give you a certificate and you're done. That's not the type of program that is supported through the dual training grant. There needs to be an instructor component to the related instruction. And this is really important because that instructor piece is a strong supporting component of the related instruction pillar. And when you take away that instructor piece, the dual trainees just aren't well supported. And we know that from different types of research that's been out there and working with training providers for a long time now. So that instructor component is important. And then the training providers need to be authorized to go ahead and grant your dual trainees or award them their industry recognized degree, certificate, or credential. We do understand that there are a variety of governing bodies, maybe in the dental occupations, different nursing occupations, where the actual certification and credentialing piece might need to come from a higher governing body. And we understand that. We can talk through what that would mean for a training provider then. But ultimately, we want to make sure the training providers can award those industry degrees, certificates, and credentials, and or see it through to make sure the individuals come out in the end with those pieces of paper, basically, for the degrees. The dual training grant for right now, we recently opened up the grant application round, and we will have $2.8 million available during this grant round. This marks our 10th grant round, and the grant will actually operate from about July of 2021 through August of 2022 for any of those applicants that are awarded grants. How the funding works for the dual training grant, this is important to know when you are planning into the future for your dual trainees. This program operates whenever the Minnesota legislature provides an appropriation. The funding gets put into a special reserve account and stays there until we can award it out. That means at the end of a 2-year biennium, we are not required to give any unused funding back to the state of Minnesota. Instead, we can keep it in the dual training grant account and roll it forward for upcoming dual training grant rounds. We are constantly kind of in this flux motion of closing certain grant contracts out, moving the money over to the new grant contracts. And that is kind of where we have landed on this 2.8 million being available this year. One grantee can be awarded up to $150,000 for that contract period. So it's $150,000 from about this July till next August. One dual trainee that is on the dual training grant plan can benefit up to $6,000 in that contract year. So it's about $6,000 a year. And the $6,000, a dual trainee can participate in a dual training grant for up to 4 years. The grantee would need to apply each year, but what that really means is a dual trainee can have up to $24,000 towards their education. This is a great thing to understand because if you have, let's say, an individual starts out as a certified nursing assistant, moves to licensed practical nurse, and then a registered nurse, there's time in there, and the individual could actually progress along that type of a pathway through a dual training grant. This is just a reminder, contract period is about 1 year. So I've set it July through August. And then the dual training grant, what it is actually going to cover is the related instruction, tuition, fees, required books and materials. What the training provider charges the grantee for those direct costs, this is our tuition, our fees, our books, what they're charging for that is what the dual training grant can reimburse for. It is based on a reimbursement model, meaning the employer, grantee, goes ahead and would pay the training provider for the instruction, then come right back, and they can do it immediately, come right back to the Office of Higher Ed and ask for reimbursement of those costs. And then there is a 25% match requirement. It is only for any grantee that has annual gross revenue exceeding 25 million in the previous calendar year. So 2020, if you were an employer, you had revenue, the gross revenue piece, 25 million or higher, then you will be required to do a 25% match. That means 25% of what the training provider is charging you. If you have a program that is fairly expensive, we have some programs that are, your bachelor's program, it'll definitely exceed our $6,000 grant and match. We cap things out for you. And the best way for me to describe this is you could think of yourself as, we're going to have a cap of our dual trainee can have $8,000 in the year. We will contribute $2,000. The grant will contribute $6,000. So if you have a program that's $30,000 in a year, really we're only having you commit to the match within the means of the grant. Believe there was a question on this. Okay, can the $6,000 to trainees be given to them directly, or does it go to the education institution? Awesome question. You as the employer would actually pay the training institution directly. You should not be giving money, any of this, and funneling it to your trainee and thinking your trainee is going to go pay their bill. You need to be paying it directly. With that being said, required books and required materials, once in a while, your trainee is going to need to maybe go to Amazon to get those books, or go to a local place to buy their scrubs. If they need to do that and you need to reimburse them that way, we can make that work, absolutely. But when it comes to the main amount of funds, you need to be paying the training provider and we will reimburse you. Awesome. For this application, I said we recently opened, yay, March 2nd, we put all of the application documents online. I'll show you that when we go ahead and navigate the website. The request for application is going to close April 16th. If you have not already, jump out to your calendar, put April 16th deadline on there, maybe mark a couple other dates for you to work on the application itself. That deadline, it's a hard deadline, so you have to meet it. If you submit Saturday morning, 10 a.m. on the 17th, we can't accept it. You got to meet that April 16th deadline. You, as an applicant, will be receive an award notice, whether you are receiving an award or not, on May 25th. So you will know by the end of May. If you are receiving an award, you are going to be required to attend orientation. We have 2 orientation dates that are already set. We have these written online and in the request for application, but June 3rd and June 7th, we have the orientation dates already set. It's a great idea to pick one of those dates now and mark your calendar, because then it's there and you don't have to worry about it. An application checklist. We actually have a really great PDF document on the website that goes through this application checklist, but I just like to show you during the presentation. Make sure you're reading through the request for application. This presentation, coupled with that request for application, you should feel really well prepared. And if you have any questions, Dan, Kathleen, myself, we are always happy to pick up the phone. We all work full time, answer a quick email, jump on a Webex to walk something through a step with you. We're happy to help. So if you feel like the materials aren't giving you the answers you need, please reach out. Then try to make sure you go ahead and read through common definitions in the FAQ. The online FAQ and FAQ PDF document are fairly long. There's been a lot of questions over the years. We've been able to put a lot of answers into those documents. Make sure, if you haven't already, and this is your very first time ever hearing about the dual training grant, reach out to Dan or Kathleen. They're our pipeline consultants, and just run by your dual training program with them. Say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking, or what we're maybe already doing, and they can give you some feedback. Oh, another great question actually just on here. Can the grant funds be paid or used to pay the trainee during their training period for on-the-job training? Another wonderful question. No, unfortunately not. We understand that on-the-job training, there's a lot of time, value, resources that go into it for your trainee and for yourself as an employer. But unfortunately, the dual training grant can only reimburse employers for the related instruction, tuition, fees, books, and materials. It just focuses on that side of the house. There are some other types of grant programs through the state of Minnesota that could potentially help with some of the on-the-job training or different types of programs you may have. And Dan and Kathleen would be happy to cover those things with you. And then, can grant funds be used to cover staff time to recruit, manage, and monitor? That's unfortunately another no. We've brought this specific thing up in multiple annual reports of the Minnesota legislature because we do understand that this grant is going to take you time and resources, but we cannot reimburse for any of that time. All right, great questions. The application checklist. Make sure that you've actually partnered with that training provider. We'll talk more about the details of that, but just make sure you've got those conversations going. And then mark your calendars with any of the important dates. April 16th, May 25th, and then those orientation dates. Dual trainee success, yay. When I'm administering the dual training grant, there is a lot that goes into the daily activity. As I know that for our employers, there's a lot that they do with administering the dual training grant. And any time that it becomes maybe overwhelming, or I might start to lose focus on that, I bring it back to why we're doing the dual training grant in the first place. And we want our employers to be successful and have, sound workforces. And with that, it comes all the way down to the individual dual trainees. And so I really want to encourage you to go out to our website, read through the profiles. We have 4 fantastic previous dual trainees who shared their stories with us. We have Sam, Blessing, Billy, and Ashley. They all work in various industries, shared how this has impacted their life. And anytime you just need that extra encouragement that this program is worth the time, it's worth the energy, and it's making an actual difference, jump out to those profiles, read through them. It'll just kind of give you that extra boost of encouragement. Okay. Well, we have been in this workshop for about 40 minutes. What I would like to do is I do want to go through the websites. I'm going to navigate ours for the Office of Higher Ed, and then Dan and Kathleen are going to navigate their websites for the Department of Labor and Industry. Once we wrap up navigating the websites, I would like to take a 5-minute break, 5-6 minute break, let everybody just kind of get a drink of water, refresh, and then we'll come back in and we're going to actually start pulling up the documents. We're going to go through an online application. I'm going to show you everything you're going to actually need to do. I'm going to stop sharing this screen because I'm going to begin sharing the Office of Higher Education web pages. Okay. Just have to navigate around the various bars that come up with Webex here. And so I'm just making it a bit of a different size. Okay, there we go. Dual Training Grant webpage. This is the very main web page. You can see on the left-hand side, we have a navigation bar for you to go through. And the dual training grant first page is just high-level information. Hey, look, there's those dual training success profiles I was telling you about earlier. Like I said, please take the time, go ahead, click on one of them. It's just a nice little one-pager about the dual trainees' success. We talk about who's eligible, the training providers, how much money can get received. So basically everything we've already talked about right now. Hold on, I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. And then we link out to the Department of Labor and Industry as well. At the very end of here, you'll see all those annual reports that I mentioned earlier. We've already got 5 that are published. We just recently in February launched our 2021 report. This report is just full of information. Each year, we keep trying to add to it to make the information better for you and navigate your programs. If you've got time, please go ahead and look at it. I think we had a question come in here. Can you clarify the length of the grant if awarded? If it's a 2-year degree, would the grant cover both years or just one? And then would we need to reapply? Awesome question. The grant only covers 1 year. So that 1 year is gonna, if you're awarded, it's guaranteed, right? Let's say we have a 2-year mechatronics degree. That first year is gonna be guaranteed. And then the grantee will want to apply again next spring. So spring of 2022, go ahead and apply. Priority in our awarding process is given to those who have dual trainees continuing into their 2nd, 3rd, 4th year. So you have a much higher likelihood of getting awarded for that 2nd year. Up until now, we have not needed to deny an application for continuing dual trainees. So we've always been able to go ahead and pay for that 2nd year, 3rd, 4th, whatever that means. We really have a commitment to making sure your employees earn their degrees. We don't want to cut them off mid-point. So definitely try to reassure your dual trainees about that, because I know that dual trainees do get nervous if you're saying, hey, we've got $6 grand for your first year, but we don't know about the second year. You can be fairly confident that we'll have funding to get them through that second, third, fourth year. Very good question. All right, I'm going back over to this menu bar, and then I'm going to click on the dual training grant request for application. And this is where, excuse me, been talking too much. This is where we are going to have all the application steps and timelines and documents. And we're going to go over all of these documents for you, but really bookmark this page. Go on to your web browser, go ahead, bookmark this so you can have all the resources, get the PDFs, Word documents downloaded, put them on a folder on your desktop. This is where you're going to be living as you do the application process. As you scroll the way to the bottom, you're going to see, it's also on the menu bar, but you'll see frequently asked questions. And we have all of those great questions that people have asked over the years in a drop-down menu format for you. We also have an area for our training and workshops. So we have these writing workshops right now that you're attending. So you should be familiar with visiting this webpage to join our meeting today. We will have grantee workshops. Last year we did small grantee workshops for going over the reimbursement process, covering what it actually is going to entail for monitoring, and a couple other various topics. So we will do like short workshops during the year to help support you. And then there are other training opportunities. The Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry has amazing events. They're for their pipeline program and apprenticeship program. And then also Minnesota Goes to College, which is a collaboration of various agencies and organizations. If you want to know how to support your employees, excuse me again. If you want to know how to support your employees through the admissions process at colleges, through the financial aid process, please visit Minnesota Goes to College. It is absolutely amazing the type of resources that they have to go ahead and support your employees. Okay. And then we have a dual training grant archive. The archive, these can be kind of manipulated to go in and out. We have every single year that we've ever done this application process and had a grant. So you can actually see all the different grantees that have been awarded throughout the years and where they're located. That is the main navigation for the Office of Higher Education. I am going to let Dan and Kathleen walk us through their web pages as well, because these will be very important for you.
Okay, yeah, Dan, are you gonna, okay, Jacqueline, you already have up the Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline website. So yeah, so this is our main page, and you get to that with by going to dli.mn.gov/pipeline. And at first, up at the top is an interactive map of partner employers, and that's the same. That actually just shows the Minnesota map with all of the employers that Jacqueline was just talking about throughout the years that the grant has been awarded to. And it's color coded by industry. So if you're interested in a specific industry such as healthcare, then you'll want to look at, I believe healthcare is red. So so that's a lot of people find that pretty interesting. So that's the first thing I did want to point out. If you go over Jacqueline, to one of the industries. All of the industries are noted here. So this is the advanced manufacturing industry. Under this tab, it will show, number one, it shows our video for our for the pipeline. And that is really pretty interesting too, as far as giving specific stories of dual trainees who have succeeded within the program. Beneath that, regardless of what industry you're in, it will say all of the specific occupations. And if you click on one of the occupations, it will bring up what we call our competency model or pyramid. We have one of those for each one of the occupations. And the very top tier is kind of what your dual trainee would be learning through on-the-job training. The second and third tier are what they would probably most likely be learning through an academic setting. And then the bottom three tiers are either competencies that the dual trainee would already have or came to you with, or will be learning, within the combination of on-the-job training and through their academics. So these are just to be used as a guide to help you when you are, completing your application. To continue down, we also have a list of definitions for the pyramid, as well as the definition of the actual occupation. And at the far bottom, we actually have a training plan. And this is all just for your information. It can really, we have talked to a lot of the companies that have applied for the grant, and they really use it as a guide to follow to, plan creating your dual training program. So we wanted as much information as possible just to help out with anyone who is applying for the grant. And then if you want to go back to the main page and go down to Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline Tools.
Kathleen, I'm going to interrupt you just
Sure,
one second.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Before we jump to the tools, just when you're getting ready to write your application, it's these competencies that Kathleen was talking about, that's what you're going to want to be pulling from and bringing that language into your application. So when it talks in the application about what are the kind of things that they're going to be doing through on-the-job training, you want to be taking that language straight from the occupation-specific competencies and using that language and saying, we plan to do whatever the method may be, job shadowing to get proficient in firewall, Linux, and network security, for example. But it's really key when you're thinking about writing your application to be pulling that language straight from these pyramids. It makes it much more easier for reviewers to know what you're talking about and to really lay it out. And so I just wanted to mention that as you're getting ready to write your application, these are really helpful in how you think about setting up your training, but also in how you're going to write your application, because you pull the language straight from these pyramids.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, that is very key to the application. There's going to be a list of reviewers for the applications. And by having that exact verbiage, it will really help them to connect the dots as far as what you're going to be training your people in. So that's awesome. Okay, so here is the page for the dual training pipeline tools. And we have actual templates for each of the occupations that will, bring it to, you can use them actually for your, if you choose to, you can use them for your dual trainees. So for example, it will say you can plug in the person's name, you can plug in your company name, they're very interactive, and you can plug in your training start date, anticipated completion date, position, email, etc. And you can really like literally fill in the blank for the related instruction on the job training. And you can keep, you know, if you choose to use it, you can track your employees' progress. You can put the number of hours that they actually, you know, spent in these different competencies, learning the competencies, and we have found that those can be very helpful if you don't already have a tracking system. Obviously, there are employers who have tracking systems, and whatever works for you is fine. But we offer this as a guide as well. And if we can go down to the pipeline events, we have all of our events listed. Oh, I also should have mentioned too, with the dual training pipeline tools, I'm sorry to make you go back, Jacqueline, but for our guidance for developing effective on-the-job training can be super helpful as well. So this just explains the basics of on-the-job training and what the 5 common types of effective on-the-job training are. And again, you may want to cite these in your application if you are using these. So the 5 main types, I'll just kind of briefly go over. Job shadowing, which most employers use. Mentorship has proven to be very successful. Cohort-based training, if you have a number of employees who are starting together and they can go through a cohort model. Assignment-based project evaluation. A lot of times in technology, we see the assignment-based OJT, and then discussion-based training. So, those all have descriptions underneath them, and we really encourage you to cite these on-the-job training tactics if you are applying for the grant.
And I would just add, you know, we always say, you don't, when you're in your application, you don't have to cite every one of them. If you never have to use all of these methods, but you should be using at least one of them. And so when you're writing your application, again, borrow this language, use this language. It will help paint a really clear picture for reviewers so they know what you're talking about. And hopefully it'll help, you know, put you all in a good path for understanding how you want to lay out your on-the-job training. So again, just to emphasize, don't have to use all of these methods. You could use 1, 2, 3, 4, or, you know, however you want to go about it, but be sure to include at least one of them in the section of the application when you write about on-the-job training.
Perfect. And let's see, if we want to go down to the pipeline related instruction inventory, this is another useful tool. You can just click on the big blue bar in the middle, and then it comes up, it's a drop-down menu. So say you're in healthcare and you're looking at one of these specific occupations, you click on one of them and then search, and it will it's not completely exhaustive, but it really has a lot of the programs that pertain specifically for what we're now looking at, medical assistant. But any of the jobs, any of the occupations, they all have a related instruction related instruction inventory component. So and all of them, when you click on the specific one for the specific college, should link up to that college's website, to their program. So hopefully that can be of help to you. And if you are thinking about using a different education program, I mean, that's completely fine. We definitely don't have the entire list of everything, and there are always new programs popping up everywhere. So just let us know and we can kind of check it out. We'll let Jacqueline know at the Office of Higher Ed, because you know, she can vet the program to make sure that it is indeed eligible for the grant. And then if you want to go to back to pipeline success, there are some success stories on the website. So and different recognition information here. So feel free to peruse the website, and I know also on the Office of Higher Ed website there are some examples too of different examples of applications and by industry. So those I know have people have found those very informative as well. Anything else, Dan, that you can think of?
No, I think thanks for sharing that, Kathleen. We're around for questions, and so we'll kick it back to Jacqueline, but we're here for if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Dan and Kathleen. Okay. This brings us to part one, which is the online application that I am actually going to do and you're going to watch so you know exactly what to expect. But before then, I'd like all of us just to take a 5-minute break. It looks like it's right around 2 o'clock. Let's come back around 2:05, 2:06, grab some water, and then we will be right back. So see you in just a little bit. Hello, welcome back. Hope everyone was able to grab a quick drink and just take a moment. We are going to start back here and jump in to the physical, actual application documents that you will submit for a Minnesota dual training grant. We are going to start with the online application. I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint right now. I'm going to go back into sharing Microsoft Edge. And then I have a link here. Okay, here we are. You should all be looking at, if you're not, let me know in the chat, but you should all be seeing on your screen right now the online application. There's a big green bar at the top that says application that's open. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna actually start out with the online application. This is your first step. Before you do the online application, we have a reminder to make sure you've looked at that request for application. And then also on the website, I want to jump and show you where it is. We have the application content. So I actually have like a PDF version of the application content, all the questions in here. If you want to look it over, remind yourself about those questions. And so you have it all ready to go. Okay. Now I just need to get back to my application. Okay, here we are. Online application, you're going to start out by letting us know what part of what industry you are of. So you have to be at least within one of these 4 industries. Again, we mentioned information technology. You don't necessarily have to be an IT employer, but your occupation does need to be directly related to information technology. I'm going to go ahead and do healthcare. And then you are going to enter in applicant, the employer, or name of the organization. You're going to let us know if you're an employer or organization of employers, because we always want to check in with you, and especially if you're an organization of employers, and just make sure you know all the ins and outs. And then you're going to enter in your address. This should be the primary address for the employer. It's really easy if you're an employer with 1 location. If you're an employer with multiple locations, please put the address that actually corresponds to the main location that most of the administration is coming from, the dual trainees are. Once in a great while, because the corporate office is outside of the state of Minnesota, we'll see an address that might be outside the state. We'll do a quick follow-up just to make sure your actual locations are within the state. Then you're going to let us know who the authorized representative is. This is the person, we have a more information button right there, but this is the person that actually can sign and act on behalf of the employer. So we want to know who the actual person is that can sign off on these contracts. And this is the person that's our primary contact for the application as well. So where all the communication is going to go to. We have plenty of applicants who there are multiple individuals who want to have the same communication. So please, whoever's name and information is in here, let them know. Forward me those emails. Make sure I'm included on any communication, because this is where all the main communication is going to go. And then phone number and email address. We need to know the type of the organizational type of the applicant. We have a description here on the application if you have any questions. I would say most of our applicants are for-profit. We have several nonprofits, and then we have had in the past a state agency. We've got a few tribal nations, and then a couple municipalities are participating as well. And then we need to know about that 25% match. Are you going to be contributing? Meaning in 2020, you had revenue that was greater than 25 million, or are you not going to be contributing? And if you're not contributing because you're underneath that threshold, that is just fine. We will collect some additional documentation from you to make sure, though, that the revenue was below the threshold. Okay. The next screen is about the general information. So we're going to say that this healthcare employer is going to train 2 dual trainees during this grant cycle. So from, we have August in here, but it can be July. You could start as early as July to next August. These are the priority award criteria. With awarding this grant, we have to, by statute, start with any of the populations that are recent high school graduate or GED earners. And that means that the employee has graduated or earned a GED on or after January 1 of 2021. And after those are awarded, we're going to move on to any of those returning dual trainees. We talked about that a bit earlier. If it's their 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year, we're going to go ahead and award them as well. For this application, I'm going to say we don't have anybody returning, so we're a brand new applicant. However, we do have 1 dual trainee that's going to be a recent high school graduate or GED earner. We have a notice in here, and it basically says, I'll just read it. If this application is awarded a dual training grant based solely upon priority award criteria and not the application score, you will only be able to train employees who meet the priority award criteria. Please check this box to acknowledge, and you're required to check this box in order to move to the next screen. Another way of saying this is, because we have to start with the recent high school graduates, then move to our continuing dual trainees, and then we can go on to anybody who's brand new, and we start at the very top and award the top scoring application, work our way down till we run out of money. So once we hit that $2.8 million, anybody below there, we're not able to award. Let's say that your application score was below kind of that threshold of being awarded fully, but you have, like here, I have 1 trainee that's going to be a recent high school graduate. If I'm awarded, and I will know this, it'll be in an email notice, it'll say it, I will be limited to only train 1 dual trainee who's a recent high school graduate. No exceptions can be made. So if I am awarded based upon only this priority award criteria, I need to make sure that my dual trainees fall within this criteria. If my application is fully awarded because I got a high ranking score on my application and I still have this 1 trainee listed on my application, there's flexibility still because my whole application was awarded. I had a high enough score. It's only when your score isn't qualifying you for the grant, but you have a priority piece that we need to award. If you have more questions about that, let me know. We're seeing this become more common, definitely last year and a little bit 2 years ago, but we're anticipating that it's going to be part of the process again, this grant round for grant round 10. We need to know if the permanent work location is the same as for the address on this application. And then we need to know exactly how much money you are requesting. A dual trainee can have up to $6,000. This application example is for 2 of them. So I'm going to request the full amount. Make sure the math works well in here. We weren't able to set up the application in a way that would air out if you didn't do the math appropriately, but you might have a program that's more affordable and maybe you only need $10,000 or maybe you only need $6,000 for the 2 trainees, and that's absolutely fine. Just make sure it doesn't exceed it. So in here, I don't want to be putting, $15,000 because that would exceed the 2 trainees that I'm putting on the application. All right, next screen. You will be filtered out. Since I selected healthcare at the very beginning, you're only going to see healthcare occupations. That is it. So you'll go ahead and you're going to let us know which one you're going to select. For this one, we're going to do a licensed practical nurse. And then we're going to do our training providers. And you can list up to 10 of them. We haven't had an applicant have over 10. If you do, please let me know. But go ahead and list all of the healthcare providers that will be serving for licensed practical nurse. And then we're going to get a little bit more specific. So for the licensed practical nurse, we need to know the exact degrees that are going to be earned. We need to know about how many months it's going to take to obtain that degree, and then if it is credit-based. And if it is credit-based, we need to know just during this grant cycle, just this year, about how many credits are you anticipating that the individual will take. and you'll go ahead and select the training provider. If you have multiple training providers, you're going to see multiple training providers listed here, and then you can go ahead, you can use your control key to select multiple. And then we would like to know what type of training that they are going to actually have, like the format, so where it's going to be located, online, distance, classroom, work location. And this brings us to the very last piece of the application. It's our checklist to make sure you've acknowledged and know all of the pieces. You're going to start off with letting us know that you're going to submit an outline about your dual training program. You're going to go ahead and submit a document showing how you selected your training providers. You're going to submit the agreements that you have with your training providers, and that's a special form that we've created. And then this is only applicable to certain applicants. So if you're going to have revenue, if you have revenue below the 25 million and you need to submit additional documentation, let us know. If you are a nonprofit, there is additional requirements for financial documentation. We will lightly touch on it, but it's in detail in the request for application. So if you're a nonprofit, you might need to submit that. And then the exemption from licensure, again, only applicable if you have a training provider that needs to go through that process. And then below is the general acknowledgement pieces. So you're agreeing to providing on-the-job training related instruction, helping support those trainees. You're agreeing to help support them in completing their programs. You're going to work with the training provider to ensure that the program actually aligns with the pipeline skills of those pyramids. You've read that 10th request for application. You understand it's a competitive process and it is subject to availability of funds. And you understand that the grant amount you're requesting on this application cannot be increased. The industry and occupations cannot be changed. The related instruction training provider cannot be added after the application deadline. And you understand that some or all of this information may be made public. That's in just this application piece. And then certifying that everything is true and correct. Go ahead and type in your name. Click submit. You will get a confirmation screen with my contact information on there. I am doing my best to follow up with an email. I have to do it manually, so our system doesn't just kick out an email confirming you've submitted. That's this screen that you get instead. And I am doing my best, though, to send you a follow-up email with next steps and that we've received everything. That is the first step. I have a note on the PowerPoint presentation that you cannot save and return to this application. You have to sit down and just finish the application in order for it to get that submission screen for it to be fully submitted. You might want to look at the content PDF that I showed you a little bit earlier, and then that'll help you before you actually start this online application. But unfortunately, I don't have a way for you to save and log back in and complete it. Kathleen did a great job of already touching on this, but when you are having a dual training program and you need to select your training provider, there are additional resources available for you. The best is to go right out to the Department of Labor and Industries pipeline pages, use their inventory. They put a lot of work in making sure that that inventory is up to date and can assist you. So that's definitely where I'd like you to start. The Office of Higher Education also has a college search, but it is only going to be for colleges. So it's not going to include all those other great training providers that aren't in the college system. So that is out there, but I definitely would like to steer you towards the related instruction training provider inventory provided by the Department of Labor and Industry. Okay, related instruction training provider selection. You actually need to go through a process of selecting your training provider. This is a requirement that is above and beyond the requirements the Office of Higher Education would have. This actually comes from the Department of Administration's Office of Grants Management. And usually for grants, when they are given to a specific party, they have to go through kind of like a contract and bidding process to make sure that they're getting a fair value for the services that they are using state funds towards. This program is slightly different, and because our statute requires you to enter into these agreements with training providers at the time of application and not after getting awarded, we've worked very closely with the Office of Grants Management to develop a process that will work well for our employers. But in general, if you have one occupation that you're applying for, you need to reach out to at least 3 training providers. We also have a targeted vendor list. And if you use the targeted vendor list, you don't have to actually go out and contact them. But if they're on the targeted vendor list, you at least need to go out, get some information. You can determine what information is valuable to you that you want to be collecting. Is it geographic location? Is it cost? Is it the format of their program? Whatever that might be. And then you're going to make a decision on that, and you're going to let us know what that decision was. I am going to stop sharing, and I'm actually going to pull up this document so you can see exactly what it looks like. Okay, you should be viewing a Microsoft Word document, application document B. It says related instruction, training provider selection. Let me know in the chat if that's not the case. This is a Word document on our website, so you could go ahead and manipulate it, add in the text that you need to add in. Basically, what we want to know is we want to know what criteria you're using for selecting your training provider. I mentioned earlier, like geography, location of the training provider, the cost of the program, if it actually has a career pathway. So some employers will look and make sure that the credentialing degrees are stacked, so they can have multiple degrees or credentials over time. Whatever that is, just put in your criteria there for us. And then also, then you are going to want to let us know who each of those training providers was. You'll put in just some general information, the date of when you got the quote, the mode of communication, was it via email, phone, the ability to meet the criteria. So are they actually meeting the location that you need or the type of cost that you need? Any other notes you might want to put in here? And then at least 2 people at your organization need to get together and make this decision. So we do ask that you go ahead and put their information in here, and then let us know about the final selection of your training provider. So this document, we're not going to question who you selected for a training provider, as long as they're an eligible training provider. But we need to know about that decision-making process and what went into that. I'm going to stop sharing the Word document. I'm going to go back out to the website, and I'm going to show you where you can find an example. We are back to the main request for application page, and under resources, we have a lot of examples. And this example right here is for the related instruction training provider selection. So we have, go ahead.
Jacqueline, sorry, this is Kathleen, and there is a question in the chat. Is this to be done for each applicant type? For example, surgical technician, LPN, respiratory, etc.
Yes, it is to be done 3 quotes per occupation. Do not let that scare you, because often we're going to look around us, we're going to see a local community college that's in our backyard, and they are going to offer, like your example, they're going to offer LPN, Surg Tech, Resp Tech. They're going to offer all of those programs. So it's still one college, but you've now checked the box for each of those occupations. Hope that makes sense. So one occupation, you have to have 3 quotes but it could be the same college for each of those occupations.
Great,
Good
thank you for
question.
that.
With this example that I'm showing you right now, we have Trex Commercial Products. This is an advanced manufacturer. And they went ahead and laid out their criteria in a question format. So like, is the cost of the program reasonable for Trex Commercial Products? And then what they did is they looked at Hennepin Technical College, Dunwoody College of Technology, and St. Paul College. They let us know when they contacted them, how they did, and then they kind of give them each a little rating, like good, poor, fair, however you want to do it. And then they took a couple notes about that. And then they let us know that there was 3 individuals that actually looked at all of this. They didn't give specific names and said, they just said, you know, as a CEO or human resources manager. And then they told us at the end, we've selected Hennepin Technical College for their technician diploma program. I'm just jumping back into the PowerPoint here. So that's the main piece of the training provider selection process. If you are a brand new applicant, this piece seems to be the most daunting for new applicants, but once they do it, they're like, oh, that was not so bad. I absolutely promise it's not as bad as it seems. You're just going out there to see what's out there, see what works well for you. You might already have an established partnership with a training provider, and we understand that, but just take that extra time to see what else is out there. You might be kind of impressed and surprised to see if there's anything else out there. Question. So we are required to reach out to 3 different colleges for a quote. We have a local college in our town. Correct, you are. You're going to be amazed at how many if we're talking colleges, you're going to be amazed at how many of them would travel from the very top northern Minnesota all the way to the very southern point of Minnesota and bring the training to you. I mean, even if the college is in your backyard, there are just some really great opportunities throughout the state of Minnesota with training providers and even outside. Like, talk about IT. I mean, the IT training provider world is just so large. So yes, you still do need to reach out to at least 3 different ones. The extent of the quote is kind of up to you. We do sometimes have it where, hey, I've reached out on this day, this day, and this day, reach out via email and phone, and I never heard back from the college. Put that in there. If you don't hear back, at that point, it's kind of beyond your control, and you can just let us know. You're not choosing them because they're not responsive. Good question. And then that brings us into the training agreement. All right, so you have actually settled on the local community college because it's right there, and they're flexible and all these other reasons. So now you need to get an agreement on file. Training providers cannot be added after this application deadline. I get that question all the time. Hey, we got this new employee, but they're attending a college we never put on the application. Can we add them? The answer is no. This has to happen at the time of application. So make sure, even if you're thinking, I'm going to use this grant as a recruitment tool for my LPN program, and I know there's 3 really great colleges in the area, get all 3 of them, get agreements then. And so when that new employee comes in and says, I'm already at this college, or I'd like to go to this college, you already have the agreement in place, you've already been awarded, and they were on your application. We have altered this training agreement this year from past years. In past years, there was a lot more language included. We've really simplified it. We don't want the training providers to think this is a contract. It's really an agreement that we want to train in a dual training model. That we've had discussions about our program here. We've had discussions about how the billing process is going to work. We're on the same page. And so we're going to go ahead and sign this agreement that is, of course, only contingent if we're awarded. And again, it's just an agreement. It's not meant to be a contract. For employers, you are more than welcome to have additional contracts with your training providers. We see it a lot on the customized side of the house, not as much on the academic side, but if you need actual contracts, you will do that separately outside of this grant. We need 1 training agreement per training provider. Even if your dual trainees are continuing from last year, we need a new agreement. We need to know that you've still talked about it for this upcoming year. And then make sure whoever is signing this training agreement is authorized to do so. It doesn't matter who signs it from our perspective, but the best groups that sign it are maybe in the third-party billing, the business office. Individuals, sometimes we'll see maybe like a dean of a program sign it. We want to make sure it's somebody who understands what this grant means, understand what it means for their them as a training provider, and so they're authorized to sign. And then the training provider is going to need to let us know on the form how they operate legally in Minnesota. So they should know that, and only be checking one box. No training provider is checking all the boxes. I see that a lot. They'll check all the boxes to cover all the bases, but really they need to actually know how they're operating in Minnesota and check the appropriate box. I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint and I'm going to bring you out to that form. Okay, you should now be viewing the application document C, training agreement, in a PDF format. This is where you're going to go ahead, you're going to let us know your industry is healthcare services, our occupation's licensed practical nurse, and they're going to be earning an associate's, sorry, OPM. And you can add your other ones on here. If you need more room, you can just print out or do an extra page for us. You're going to put in all your information. So we have all of your information in here, who that authorized rep is. And then your training provider is going to do the same. So they're going to let us know that they are their name and who's authorized to sign everything. And right here's where I was talking. Either they're operated by the state of Minnesota or Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota. They're registered, licensed, or they're exempt from licensure. If they're exempt from licensure, they already have a valid exemption certificate on file, or they're going to go ahead and submit the appropriate documentation to see if they can have that certificate. And then the second page is the acknowledgement pieces. So we understand, we've read and understand the actual request for application. You've had the conversation and discussed the type, format, scheduling, availability of the related instruction program. You've reviewed and discussed policies and procedures related to billing. You've reviewed and discussed policies related to student rights, responsibilities, privacy, including FERPA. And you understand that participation in the grant is subject to availability of funds, and that the training agreement is true. I have a couple questions on here. Okay, targeted vendor list. It is in the request for application. It's a PDF document. I think it's almost 30 pages. It's a PDF document on the website, and there is actually links to the targeted vendor lists. And then document B, training. Well, where is everything located? Yes, it is on the website. I will jump back out there and I will show you. We have everything already available for you to click on, download, and look at. And then this form, you're going to go ahead and you're going to sign off on this. I want to do one quick note on one of these certification items in here about the availability of related instruction. There have been several times where an employer will enter into an agreement with a training provider. They'll get awarded this grant, and this happens a lot in healthcare. And then they'll go to enroll their employees through the admissions process, only for the training provider to say, well, we filled up like that medical assistant, surge tech program, whatever it is, it filled up back in February, March. You need to make sure you're having those conversations now. Is that the case? Is there a way to secure a couple of spots for you as an employer if you're granted? Make sure you're having the conversations about their admissions timelines and whether their programs typically are full or not. You want to know that and have that conversation at this point. You don't want to find out in May, in June, the program's been full for the last couple months and your employees can't even get into it. Okay, I'm gonna go back out to the browser online here. Here we are. Okay, so request for application page, Office of Higher Ed. Application, that's where that application link and application content is. Then application documents. Request for application is that PDF that I have right here. You're gonna find the targeted vendor list under the related instruction section. And then you find all your documents here, A, B, C, D. These are the things you want to focus on. A, B, C is definitely for everyone. D is only for certain select people. And then we have the resources below. We have examples. We have samples of all the OJT for each of the areas. We actually have licensed certificates on here, common definitions, frequently asked questions, everything is on here. This is the website that you want to bookmark. Okay. We're back to the PowerPoint presentation, and we are going to move in to application document A. This is the main document that the review committee is going to score your application. Most of your effort and time needs to go into this. An online application is quick. The related instruction training provider, I know that there's some things you need to do, but as far as completing the form for us, that's quick. This is really where you want to put your energy and your time. The applications are scored out of 100 points, and you want to make sure you provide enough detail so a reviewer understands your dual training program, but you also need to be concise, because sometimes too much information will also lose a reviewer because you're too far into the weeds. So try to strike a good balance. And you are welcome to attach minimal documents for visual representation. If you already have just an outstanding OJT plan and you want to just give us a one-page screenshot of something to give a reviewer a better idea of it, absolutely. But I do say minimal. Please do not have an overwhelming amount of attachments included in your application. And I'm going to jump out to that document now. This is the Word document. No, this isn't the right one. Let me switch. There we go. Application document A. At the top, you're going to want to let us know which industry, occupation, training provider, and degree you're doing. Okay, the first criteria. So we need to go ahead. I apologize, I just noticed a little bit of a typo. The first couple questions actually all relate to the very first criterion, and that all has to do with your on-the-job, with your dual training program. So the very first question, you want to use those skills that Dan was talking about earlier on the dual training pyramids. You want to talk about those skills that are going to get pulled from related instruction. So you'll put that information in at the very start here. Then this second piece, you want to pull the skills from those pyramids in for on-the-job training. And then you want to go ahead and you want to illustrate what that looks like for on-the-job training. And we have an example built into the template for you, where you talk about which occupation it is, the mode. Kathleen mentioned the 5 main modes, like job shadowing, and then the skills, the competencies that are learned, and about how many hours it's going to take to do those tasks. So we have a little bit of an outline in here. And then you are going to want to go ahead and correlate all of that. So a really nice summary paragraph or two about how this related instruction at the training provider is pairing well with the on-the-job training tasks that you're helping provide, and you put them together, and that is what's going to lead to the success of your dual trainee. So you just want to summarize that. And then for the next criterion, this is actually number 2, you want to let us know, in addition to the grant, resources that will minimize direct costs of related instruction for the dual trainees. You're going to be scored on the cost a dual trainee would have to complete this program. There are some programs that are more expensive. They're a full bachelor's in engineering program. They're a master's in information technology. And if you as an employer are not going to cover all the additional costs, and there is going to be cost to that dual trainee on their own, out of their own pocket, you want to provide what's happening there. Let us know if it's going to cover all the costs. If it's not, how is the employer contributing? If the employer isn't contributing to the additional costs, is there federal, state financial aid programs? Give a rationale for it. This section is super straightforward if we're in a program that is a lower cost and the grant covers everything, right? So you're going to get a fairly high score. But if you do have additional costs, providing a good reasoning rationale behind that will help with your application score. And then for Criterion 3, this is the internal and external employment opportunities for dual trainees upon completion. So really, kind of letting us know, all right, they've completed this dual training program, they've earned this degree. Now, internally, these are the opportunities that they have available to them. And then externally, outside of our organization, these are the different types of pathways that are now available to them. And then lastly, the very last criterion is compensation for the dual trainees upon completion. Here is where you really do want to mention anything to do with wage incentives that are directly related to the dual training program. If you have a wage scale, if dual trainees will be earning 20 cents more an hour because they've completed a dual training program, whatever the case, you do want to discuss the wage information here. In addition to wage information, if you have other types of compensation like different titles, positions, work shifts, or other benefits, you also want to mention it here. We tell grant reviewers that compensation can go above and beyond wages, but the strongest scores are going to come to those who actually build in wage information into their program. It's not a requirement of the grant to have wages increase. However, the statute still wants us to score based on whether they will be compensated that way. And then any closing remarks you have. I'm going to stop sharing the Word document. I'm going back in to online because I want to show you where an example is. So just like we had an example for selecting a training provider, we also have an example of the program outline. It's the same employer that was used in both the examples. So we have Trex Commercial Products. I didn't say it earlier, but these examples are actually based on real applications from last year. So they might be slightly different, but for the most part, they fit into this year very well. So Trex Commercial Products went ahead and they described their company at the very top. They let us know that they were doing CNC programmers, their training provider, and the type of diploma that their individuals would be earning. They went and described the related instruction, where it's located, all the different types of skills that are going to be earned at Hennepin Technical College. And then they described their on-the-job training and how they were going to be doing it, job shadowing, mentorship, discussion, the different types of manual milling, turning operations, all those skills. And then they went and used the template and got into more detail to let us know we're going to be doing job shadowing, mentorship. We're going to be focusing on the maintenance competencies. It's going to be about 8 hours. And this one is, they put a lot into it, which is great. And then they did a correlation. So they connected all those pieces together, the Hennepin Tech program, those on-the-job training tasks, and what it means and how it actually applies directly to them at Trex Commercial Products. And then they let us know that their employees are not going to have any costs outside of this. that Trex Commercial Products would cover any type of school expenses that weren't going to be covered by the grant. And then they talked about internal and external opportunities that they had for their employees. And then compensation. They put some information about just kind of baselines or what the typical machinists and programmers make, and then how that relates to them. And then they also talked about 401k matches and different types of opportunities. And then just a couple sentences to close their application. This application last year received the highest score out of all applications. I think we had right around 100 applications. So this is a really good example to read through, and the review committee is very different every year, but at least you can know that this was a high scoring application. Okay. With that program outline, when you are working on it, Dan mentioned this earlier, make sure you are talking about the on-the-job training piece. You got job shadowing, mentorship, cohort-based training, assignment-based project evaluation, discussion-based training. Make sure this is in there. You need to be including this on-the-job training. If you don't have strength in your on-the-job training plan, this application could potentially not move forward to the review committee. And if it does move forward to the review committee, they might score it low. Reviewers are very adamant on making sure you have an on-the-job training plan. That is where, if you're going to lose points, this is where you would lose the points. So make sure it's strong and sound, and then you can easily gain those points in your application. We already talked about any of the applicants with the match and what that means. And then any of our nonprofits, I briefly mentioned, we're going to require additional financial documentation. Kind of depends on where the income and revenue levels are. In general, most nonprofits just send us a copy of their certified audit, the most recent audit, and we're able to pull the information that we need. And then we talked about the exemption from licensure application. I'm not going to go into this in detail for purposes of this workshop because so few of our training providers are actually part of the exemption from licensure. But if you have questions, definitely let me know and reach out to me. And then I also covered this a bit earlier, but awarding for those priority conditions. Again, as a reminder, we are going to start with those applications with recent high school graduate or GED earners as of January 1, 2021 or later. And then we're going to move on to any of our dual trainee populations continuing their programs. And then we're going to move into the brand new dual trainees and the application scores. And if you were awarded based upon only the award priority conditions and not your application score, you are going to be restricted to train just within these groups. We've only got about 10 minutes available, and I do want to leave at least 5 minutes for some questions. This is if you move from applicant to grantee status. So May 25th, you get an email from us saying, congratulations, you've been awarded X amount. You're required to attend mandatory orientation. Even if you've already attended one before, past years, or participated, you need to be there. Also, if you're an employer of organizations, each employer that you've already identified beneath you, they need to also have at least one representative attending. So we have them Thursday, June 3rd from 2 to 4, or Monday, June 7th from 10 to noon. And then as soon as this orientation happens, you're going to hit the ground running with getting your work plan in place, getting your dual trainees to sign agreements, and then you're going to be setting up a contract. The contract is extremely important. You cannot begin any coursework or on-the-job training until this contract is in place. And so if you have a program, a lot of our programs start at the end of August. If you have a program that starts at the end of August, get this contract done in July. Do not wait. If it is the day before and we're setting up a contract, it's going to be signed late, and we're not going to allow any of that coursework that started to be part of the grant because that date is when things start. With contracts set up this year, you are actually going to be working with my manager, Megan Fitzgibbon, and she will help you get all of the contracts set up, get all the signatures on there that are necessary. Okay, stop and sharing. I'm going to go into this presentation and I'm going to allow everybody to unmute themselves if they would like to. But we are definitely open for questions. Dan, Kathleen, myself, happy to answer anything that you might want to ask verbally or put into the chat. If you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to exit the workshop, but we will be here until 3 o'clock to answer any of your questions.
Jacqueline, there's a question here. If grant is awarded, will the orientation on June 3rd or 7th be via Webex or in person?
Great question. It'll be via Webex. We don't use Webex, we'll use like Microsoft Teams, but it'll be virtual. We have, up until COVID, always been able to do this presentation, orientations, everything in person, and unfortunately can't at this time. And we know that no travel will be allowed of our enterprise until at least July 1 or later. So everything will be online and virtual, and hopefully that'll be convenient for you. With orientation, it's good to have an individual who's administering the grant, the person who's the authorized representative as well attending. You do not need to have your dual trainees attending at that time. You may not even know who they are for a while, but you don't have to do the dual trainees. It's really going to be an orientation for administering the grant for the upcoming year. Another question in the chat. If using the program as a recruitment tool, how do you recommend going about communicating that to potential applicants? Maybe can you clarify that question? Do you mean like how does the Office of Higher Ed communicate that to applicants applying for a grant? Or do you mean communicating that to leadership at the within the employer or communicating it to potential dual trainees. Potential dual trainees. Yeah, so this gets done all the time. A really great example that's concrete. M Health Fairview, they would get the grant for like certified nursing assistants, right? So X amount. We'll just say it was like $50,000. And they knew they had it, but they hadn't yet recruited for the CNA positions. Then what they did actually is they would create applications, and then they focused on their internal employees, and they would market it with flyers, making sure it got put out in emails. It was communicated to supervisors, and the supervisors were saying, you know, so-and-so might be a good fit for this. And then they went through a fairly extensive application process to select their employees. Some of our maybe like other types of grantees, maybe they got a smaller amount. Let's say they only got like a $6,000 or $12,000 award, so they only plan to recruit 1 or 2, and it's somebody brand new who is coming straight from high school or from a different place, and they're sitting in the interview, and then they have this conversation. Like, that's kind of their leverage, right? So they're sitting in the interview, they know that they really want to hire this individual, and they say, you know, we have this education opportunity, we have $6,000 to help send you to that welding class or welding degree. And so they'll leverage it right there on the spot. So some of the grantees will go through a very extensive process, and other ones will be doing it just right on the spot as they're recruiting. They know how much money they have, and they know that that's how they want to bring in those applicants. If using the program, oh, we did that one, sorry. Do we reach out to third-party billing to determine the dates regarding invoicing reimbursement, or does the grantee have to provide grades? Simple when tuition's due, the employer pays the bill, requests the money, we're a small business, so just thinking about cash flow. Gotcha. You want to talk to your training provider about their third-party billing procedures. What we often see in a traditional college setting with third-party billing is they will put a special hold on that student's account so the student's account doesn't become overdue. And then usually in October, November, the college will send the employer a bill. Hey, fall tuition was $2,000. The employer pays the $2,000, and immediately you can invoice us to reimburse you immediately. Our time frame on our end, it usually takes me about 5 business days to look everything over, and then maybe another 5 business days for us to get the money over to you. And if it's electronic transfer, it's very quick. So everything could be potentially done within a month, from the time you receive that invoice from the college to the time you have money there back to you. If there is an extreme financial hardship that an employer is going through and they do not have any means to actually pay that bill, we can work with them to potentially, our agency goes and pays that college training provider directly. That is an option. We'd want to talk about that if there's an extreme hardship for the employer, because we definitely understand the cash flow. We don't want to hold up any type of funds. Should we complete part 1 of the application right away? If you already know what your dual training program is and you've got a good sense of it, get that application on file right away, and then get those other pieces in as soon as possible. The earlier you submit everything, the better chance we have to look at it and let you know if something's missing. If we're close to April 16th, there's no way we can even let you know if you're missing anything, and then you just wouldn't move forward if an item's missing. But don't complete that online application if you really have no idea where you're going, because you can't edit it. So we'd have to manually go back and forth to make those edits. So if you know what you're doing, go ahead and fill it out. And then slowly get us the documentation for parts 2 and 3. And we are right at 3 o'clock. If there's not any more questions, we can end the workshop. Thank you very much for attending today. Greatly appreciate it. You know, I said it a lot, but definitely myself, Kathleen, Dan, we are more than happy to help you. We are available. Email, call us, reach out. We'll go through your specific circumstance as well. Okay, everybody have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.